it's Alison from Happy Soul. I wanted to share with you my experience that I had yesterday, which was so incredibly cathartic. Obviously, I'm a tapper. I use EFT tapping for myself several times a week, sometimes a couple of times a day. But I obviously support people to release a lot of stress and trauma. But yesterday I was releasing my own next level, if you like, of grief, because I've been working to release this grief, particularly recently. As some of you might be aware, my dearest mum passed away last year, and I used tapping to help me with the shock because she died of cancer. I used tapping to help me release all the sadness for her and the sadness for myself and everybody else who was going to be affected, and that really helped. I can't tell you how much that helped me come to a sense of peace, which I really don't think I would have been able to even talk about it like this if I hadn't had this amazing tool. So grief is an incredible emotion, and everybody who's watching will know what I mean, because on some level you will have experienced grief. So it could be, you know, recollection of when you were little and somebody took a toy from you, or your best friend decided to go and play with somebody else, and you were full of sadness and just feeling desperate and you know, that grief. So what happened yesterday for me was I was working with a client in the morning who I was supporting to let go of her grief from her mother passing away about 25 years ago. And even though I was completely with her and I didn't feel at all upset about me, of course, little, like a cog in a wheel starts to turn just slightly about, okay, I relate to that a bit, of course, because my mum's also died, but I was with her. But what I realised afterwards as the day progressed was I just had this opportunity, because I could feel something coming, another piece of my grief about my mum, or I'll call it another aspect. Because there's many different things and components to grief and loss. So I just was driving along at the time and I could feel something. I thought, I'm going to take this opportunity to do what I go on about all the time, which is tapping. So I pulled over into a car park and I just started tapping and talking, really, and just started to let it flow. I was acknowledging all the sadness about being in the room with my mum when she was actually diagnosed. I actually tapped on the shock first, because I haven't actually tapped on that bit before. So I did quite a bit of tapping on the shock, and I could feel my breath was very held when I was in the shock response, and I couldn't breathe properly, and I knew I was onto something good as far as releasing it. So I just continued to work with it until my breath started to regulate, and then more deep sadness came in different layers. Sadness for mum and what she experienced, because it was a shock for her. She was about to get married. It was totally unexpected. We never thought this would happen to our mum. So there was so many different layers of sadness. Sadness for me, losing mum. Sadness for mum, losing her life and not being with her. Sadness for her because she wasn't going to get married to this amazing man she'd met, who she was madly in love with. And then I cleared that, and that took about 5-10 more minutes, because I have done a lot of work on that, and I started to get a sense of peace. But then it was connecting, of course, to other things that relate to that sadness. And I took myself back. It was very natural. I just ended up going right back to early childhood. And even though I don't remember my dad actually leaving, I could be there with this sadness for this little 2-year-old girl. And I tapped on that, and I was tapping and crying and tapping and crying. And just imagining that little girl, or imagining tapping on her and giving her love and support. And it was just great. And then other flooding memories were coming in about other things that I felt grief about. You know, friendships that at times I was a little sad about. But then big things that came in my life when my 2 sisters left home. And that came up, and I was tapping and I was talking to them, and I was just expressing my sadness and tears. And it was just incredible. I knew it was going to be a really big release for me, because I know about the impact of tapping, and I know about trauma, and I know about letting go of sadness and loss and grief. So there was those layers coming up, and then there was more recent stuff. Well, I say recent, I've been in Australia now for about 30 years, and I've been carrying on some level grief for England, since I was 23, and I'm 53 now. So I was really in a space at this level now with my tapping, all the sadness about home, about England and the green, green grass and all my beautiful friends and my family. So I was tapping and talking to them, letting that all come through and releasing that as well. And I've done work on this, but it all came to a big head yesterday afternoon, and I knew when I could feel it that it was going to be really, really good for me. Then, of course, it moved into, well, I say of course, but you'll relate to this, then it moved into the grief of COVID and how that's impacted all of us, and the sadness for people who've lost people to COVID, and the sadness for people who've been trapped inside, sadness for all the suffering that's going on in the houses that's not good. And then there was sadness on another level again for me personally, because I don't know when I'm next going to see my family. I'm not going to have the jab. That's just something I know in my heart that's not going to happen. So at the moment, I don't know what that means for me getting back to England. So I tapped on all the sadness, which helps me get clear about the future and to feel into a positive future instead of a fearful, I'm never going to see them again. So it's so important. That's why I wanted to share with you just my experience yesterday, how incredible it was. I mean, I know what to do, and I know some of you who are watching don't know what to do. And if you want to know more, of course, connect with me and I can share with you anything at all that can help you, even just some resources. Or of course I can work with you privately. But that's not really why I wanted to come on to just, talk about my services. It was really just to give you a real life experience of how tapping can be so incredibly supportive. And not only, of course, to you emotionally, because I've been carrying this grief for years and years and years. And as I say, you will relate to this because that's why you're watching it. You don't have to travel to the other side of the world to feel grief. We have grief from the moment we're born. There's tears when you're born, and maybe separation from your mum or your dad. But for me, I know that it's been really, really good thing to do this real big, powerful power tap I did yesterday, because it's affected my health. I know it's affected my digestion, not being able to digest life, feeling this conflict between where I live. I live in Australia, I'm Australian, I'm also British, so I've had this real conflict. That makes me tense, that makes it hard for me to digest. So it was really profound, and I really wanted to share it with you because you can have the same relief. There's no reason why you can't have the relief that I've felt today from grief and loss and trauma and conflict. It's really just one of the most amazing tools that I've ever come across. And I want you to have the relief that I have experienced since I came across it 15 years ago. But particularly when you're being held with somebody who knows what they're doing, and you're in a peak, and you've got that intensity of tears, and if you can just somehow just tap through it, don't even worry about what words you're saying. There's so many things in the background that will be taken care of, things that you don't have to name out loud. And that's what happened to me yesterday. I was talking out loud, but I was also very aware there was many things being resolved in this amazing, intense, emotional release. So I hope you've got something from listening to my story, and I know I've sort of encapsulated what my grief experience has been. And today I feel different. I feel clearer and lighter, and certainly more positive about our future. I won't go into fear now because I want to talk about grief and loss, but they're sort of interrelated, of course. But I just have this sense of we have the opportunity to have an amazing future. And even though the world at the moment appears very scary and there's a lot of suffering, and there always has been, and this is a new type of suffering with this pandemic, I really invite you to work through what makes you feel tense, what really it is that you're hard that you're finding so hard to be at peace with. You know, asking yourself those questions. What am I not able to accept? What is it that I'm not at peace with now? What is it when I reflect on that still makes me go into a fight, a flight or a freeze response? And there's another one, which is the flop, which is the chronic fatigue and the exhaustion. So just begin to maybe start asking these questions as you're listening to me, and maybe writing a few notes down. I would really love to hear from you about, you know, what's going on for you, and open up a dialogue. Please leave your comments below if you found this insightful, helpful. It really helps others when they read the comments. And of course, you can contact me privately if you want to have a chat and see if I can help in some way. I do groups as well, so there's affordable ways to get help. And if you've got to this point of the video, thank you so much for getting to this point. I would like to tell you I do have this video here, which is to help you with sadness and loss. You can try that next. It's just a short tap. It's not going into any great depth and detail because I don't really want to encourage you to do that on your own. But certainly this video might support you to just release some sadness and grief that you're feeling right now after I've been speaking. So thanks so much for listening to me. I will be making some more videos where I'm just having a conversation. So please let me know if you're enjoying them. And I do wish you a lot of love and light. And I want to encourage you to say that you can feel better. You can move on from grief and loss. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.